Hi everyone, Ian here again with Family History Time with Ian and Family Genealogy. So this video is going to focus mainly on revisiting the story of Amy Courts, who is the earliest recorded ancestor of mine as an African American member of the Courts family. And from her birth in 1815 in Wake County, North Carolina, to her migration to Rockingham County, North Carolina, where she worked on the Courts family plantation, to her life post-emancipation, to her presumable death in the early 19th century. So I'm going to show you some documentation and really kind of tell the story or the context as best as I can based off the historical record of Amy Courts, the earliest member of the African American Courts family in Rockingham County, North Carolina. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. For Amy Courts is this deed from Wake County. Within the deed, there is this man named Isaac Hunter. For a lot of people who are familiar with North Carolina history, Isaac Hunter was a well-known person within the Wake County area. He owned Isaac Hunter's Tavern, the Hunter's Tavern. In that tavern, it was a well-known stopping grounds for people who were passing through Wake County. It kind of operated as like an inn as well as, an area where people could congregate to drink, to eat, to get supplies, and to continue on their way. So Isaac Hunter, though, was a slave owner, and he owned Amy Courts, who's the earliest Courts ancestor I have. And in May, he sold Amy Courts and 4 other enslaved West Africans to a man named Burwell Perry Jones. So in May of 1817. And so this document is written in cursive, more of a 18th century cursive, which is still English, but it's kind of hard to read and for our modern lens because of just the condition of the document. So one of the wonderful things that Wake County does is it has a public record search where you can you can put in Google Wake County Enslaved Persons Project or Enslaved Persons Record, and you can put in whatever names or information you have about your ancestors, and it can pull up deeds, wills, and other things that include these persons on them. So this is the Wake County Enslaved Persons Records kind of, distilling of that previous document I showed you in cursive. So this was a bill of sale from the sale of an enslaved person named Amy, who's my ancestor, and 4 other enslaved West Africans, or a total of 5 enslaved persons, was sold by Isaac Hunter of Wake County to Burwell Perry Jones of Wake County. And he purchased these humans for $1,000. So these 5 African Americans, these 5 Black Americans, these 5 people were sold for $1,000 total on May 17th, 1817. What's interesting about this document is it's literally the only record, the earliest record I have of Amy. And how I got to this document was because in Ancestry, when I was putting in the information of my great-grandfather, his father, his father's father, William Courts, and his mother, Amy Courts, was listed in the census records with him, as well as on his death certificate. And on one of his death certificates, it said that his mother's birthplace was Wake County. And I'm going to show you that record. Because when you're doing your family history, it's kind of like putting pieces of a puzzle together. You find something in one area that connects you to another area and gets the mind going. So as you can see here, this is the certificate of death for William Courts, who is the son of Amy Courts. And it lists his mother as an Amy Jackson because she married a man named Jackson Palmer, or Palmer Jackson, in Rockingham County, and her birthplace is listed as Wake. So this document kind of corroborated the bill of sale that Isaac Hunter did with Amy, selling her to Burwell Perry Jones in Wake County in 1817. It corroborated those two documents. And so this is like when you're doing ancestry tree building, as well as just any genealogical research, you want to be able to have multiple sites to verify and confirm some of the facts that you find, because we weren't there, but the documents can paint a picture and provide additional context and support for some of the narratives and claims that we make. And so as you see here, Reverend William Courts, this is his gravestone, is the son of Amy. This gravestone does not have his birth date, but it does have his death date as February of 1917, and presumably he was 65 years old, according to this tombstone when he died, which would have put his birth in about the 1840s. However, according to the Courts family slave codes, which was given to me by the white European members of the Courts family, one particular member that has Amy listed on here, born in May 6, which corroborates with the bill of sale from Wake County, and a William listed as being born in January 2nd, but in the year 1841 or 42. So corroborating also with the tombstone. Amy got to Rockingham County after this man, Daniel William Courts, married a Martha Jones of Wake County, but of the White Plains Plantation. And so here's a picture of the White Plains Manor House in Cary, North Carolina. Amy was presumably born on this plantation in Wake County. So here's a picture of Isaac Hunter's Tavern, and of course the ruins of Isaac Hunter's Tavern, or at least the outer shell of it. Amy was owned by Isaac Hunter, probably lived on whatever farm homestead he had close to the tavern, and was sold in 1817 to Burwell Perry Jones of the White Plains Manor House. Burwell Perry Jones was the brother of Martha Jones, who became the second wife of a planter from Rockingham County named Daniel William Courts. And here's a picture of Daniel William Courts. Daniel William Courts married Martha Jones in 1847, and that's presumably the date that Amy moved from Wake County to Rockingham County. And shortly, either before she got there, either she had young William prior to moving to the Rockingham County Courts Plantation, or shortly thereafter had her son named William Courts, born in the 1840s, who is an early ancestor of mine. So Amy Courts lived on Daniel William Courts' Rockingham County Plantation and worked there until the Emancipation Proclamation and the end of the Civil War, when she became a freed person. So Amy was sold by Isaac Hunter to Burwell Perry Jones. Burwell Perry Jones of the White Plains Manor in Wake County was the brother of Martha Jones, the second wife of Daniel William Courts. And so prior to Martha and Daniel Williams' marriage in 1847, Amy had two sons in Wake County, a Moses Courts and a Levi Courts, born in 1841 and 1849. Once she gets to the Courts family plantation in Rockingham County, after the marriage of her mistress, her female mistress, and her now new owner, Daniel William Courts, she gives birth to one of my ancestors, William Courts, Reverend William Courts, whose tombstone I will show you. So she moves to the Rockingham County Courts family homestead or plantation. And here's a picture of that plantation home from the White Plains Manor. And she gives birth to William, one of my ancestors, William Courts. William Courts is born, according to the census, in 1852. So his name is very similar to Daniel Williams' name. There could have been potential respect just because he was her owner. So she named her first child that she has on his plantation after him. However, she does have a son named Levi, who was born in 1849, who would have technically been her first child she had on the Rockingham County Courts Plantation. But she names her son, who she has a few years after being on the Courts Plantation, William, which is the middle name of Daniel William Courts. And this Reverend William Courts, who later became a minister of the gospel, is buried within the Old Court Cemetery, now known as the Old Sattler Cemetery, named after Sattler Elementary School, but not far from where the Courts family plantation was. He is buried in that cemetery where Daniel William is buried and other members of Daniel Williams' family, including Martha Jones, the original mistress, i.e. owner of Amy Courts. So Amy gives birth to a son named Henry, a son named Isaac, right around the time of the Civil War, and a daughter named Jenny right after the Civil War. So in 1870, she lives in Rockingham County in the Oregonville area of Rockingham County, which is close to Ruffin. Then she moves to Williamsburg in 1880 in Williamsburg, North Carolina, which is in Rockingham County, a little ways down the road from Ruffin and a little more distant from where the Courts family plantation was. But the last record of her is in 1910, in the 1910 census. She's presumably 93 years old when she was born, presumably in 1815 or 1817. And this is the last record of her. She's listed as a widow, and presumably she dies at some point in the early after 1910, within that year or later. So Amy lived 93 years, which is interesting because her great-grandson, my great-grandfather, lived to be 101 when he passed. So there's some longevity there in that family tree and family blood. So why this is important? This is interesting to me because it provided a starting point for me in my family history research. It started a point of origin, someone I could point to and have documentation with that essentially was the matriarch of our family. We only know about one person she married, at Jackson Palmer, sometime at the end of the Civil War. Prior to that, there was no recorded marriage, slave or otherwise, to her. And her first son she has on the Rockingham County Courts Plantation, she names William. Why is this important? Why am I highlighting this? It is my theory that Daniel William, or one of his family members, or someone on the plantation, was the biological father of William Courts. And therefore, William Courts, who's my ancestor, one of the sons of Amy Courts, started the African American Courts branch in Rockingham County. Reason for that is not only his name, but also the fact that he was buried in the Old Courts family cemetery, which was unusual. Not a lot of plantation owners allowed even enslaved persons that they liked very well to be buried with them and their family in their cemeteries. So he's named after him, he's buried there, and he's had shortly after Amy arrives on the Courts family plantation. Yes, she has two other sons, one that was born right when she got there, and one born prior to her getting there when she was on the White Plains plantation. But her first child she has on the Courts family plantation is a William Courts. And I can get into other things about just old family tales of relation between the African American branch of the courts and the white branch or the European branch of the Rockingham County Courts. But to me, the contextual, and it might be circumstantial, it is circumstantial because there's nothing directly connecting it, evidence is that someone on the Courts plantation, presumably of the Courts family, I argue it's Daniel William Courts, was the progenitor of the African American Courts family through, the exercise of their ownership over Amy's body. Thus, she gave birth to her first child on the Courts plantation, William Courts. And William Courts went on to do some amazing things. He went on to become a planter himself, not a slave planter, but a tobacco planter and a farmer himself. He owned his own home and married a woman named Ellen Mullins, and had a host of children, including my great-great-grandfather, Joseph Courts, who gave birth to my great-grandfather, who I love and who I miss and who I dearly miss, and who is part of the inspiration for me putting these videos out and sharing a little bit. Purpose of me doing these videos, again, I want to articulate, is to inspire other people, especially other African Americans, to dig into your family history, investigate, question, pose narratives, back it up with evidence, not only on ancestry, but as I did with looking at slave codes and slave schedules and slave records, kind of piece together that entire story. Our story doesn't necessarily start at the end of the Civil War, that many of us have heritage that goes back before the Civil War in this country, and we have contributed to the success of this country, and we still do today. And so that is my second video, diving into and telling a little bit more of the history and the story of Amy Courts, the earliest courts, African-American courts ancestor, who was the matriarch of our African-American courts family. And my theory that her first son, it would be my great-great-great-grandfather, was the son of Daniel William Courts. So thank you for listening to this. Please watch it again, please share, and also tell your own story. And keep these memories, these records, this history and heritage for the next generation who comes along, who may not know some of the things you know, may not have access to an ancestry, but can remember the oral history and the documented evidence that you have about your family history. Thank you, and I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm coming next week with more videos about my family history and genealogy.